Welcome in, everyone. This is Catfish on Ice. We got Aaron Sims joining us, radio announcer for the Milwaukee Admirals. We're getting you set for the Calder Cup playoffs. Very awesome. We might not have the Nashville Predators in the playoffs, but we still got playoff fever with our Milwaukee Admirals. Aaron, thank you so much for joining us on such short notice.
It's my pleasure. And you kind of do. Like, think about all the guys that have played back and forth between Milwaukee and Nashville this year. You kind of got a taste here. A lot of guys played 20-plus games with Nashville this year, and they're still going for a championship. It's in the American League, but they're still going here.
Absolutely. You're seeing some of the same players that are going to be a big part of this Admirals playoff run that were just playing for the Predators and trying to get the Predators into an improbable playoff spot. Have you ever seen anything like this in all of your years of covering a AHL team?
I started in 05, 06, and no, there hasn't been this kind of mass graduation, so to speak, between the teams. The injuries that piled up, and let's face it, like in my time, Nashville has always been a playoff team, save for a year or two. So it's pretty uncommon that all of this has happened. I remember in 13-14, Barry Trotz's last year as head coach, there were quite a few players that went back and forth. People remember Simon Moser, Mark Van Gilder played a game, Daniel Bang, lots of different names that went back and forth in that season. But that was the year Nashville wasn't in the mix, right? The 2021 season, when a lot of players, Milwaukee didn't field a team that year or put a team on the ice that season. So there were a lot of young players because of all the injuries that happened in Nashville that finally got their chance, but nothing like this in season since I've been here. This has been pretty wild.
Yeah, for sure. So Friday is going to be game one for the Admirals. Get everyone caught up on the playoff format in the AHL because it is a little different.
It is.
Than the NHL. So for some of our listeners, they might not understand how it works, where the Milwaukee Admirals slotting in at on the bracket and all that stuff.
There aren't. So the divisions aren't even. There are 10 teams out in the Pacific. There are 7 in Milwaukee's division, the Central. There are 7 in another one, and there's 8 in another one. Those are out east. We don't deal with them really. So as it works out, there are 23 out of the 32 teams in the American Hockey League make the playoffs. In the Pacific Division, the only team that gets a bye is the number 1 seed. Then 2 plays 7, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5, and that's how that goes. In the Admirals division, the 4th place team was Iowa. The 5th place team was Rockford. Rockford won both games in overtime. So they move on, best 2 out of 3 there. So Rockford will take on top seed Texas, the Admirals in Manitoba. So now the first round, we used to call them shirt tails, I think, when we were in wrestling or something like that. So that first round is the first round, and now we're in division semifinals. Then it'll be division finals, and then it'll be conference finals, and finally the Calder Cup finals. The Admirals in the division semifinals, against Manitoba. It is a little confusing. I think a lot of teams just try to avoid that first round series, at least in the Central Division. Most of those others, man, especially in the Pacific, you better be number 1. Otherwise, you're playing a best 2 out of 3, and weird things can happen in those 2 out. So you just never know, right? Like Milwaukee has a lot of players back from Nashville. Manitoba doesn't. So you could end up in that way. Like Coachella Valley has players up in Seattle. Colorado has players with the Avalanche, but you might end up and San Diego didn't make it, but you may end up playing San Diego, and Anaheim didn't make the playoffs. So all of a sudden 7 guys are back from Anaheim. So yeah, it's pretty wild, but management wanted to give as many players as they could the opportunity to learn what it's like to be in a playoff experience. And this is a teaching league. This is a learning league. So I get it to a degree. It does get confusing, but at least we're all playing the same number of games this year for the first time ever. So that is a big point going in the right direction.
For sure. Yeah, it's kind of a complicated bracket, but I give them props for creativity. I mean, whoever came up with that format, that takes a lot of moving teams around. He said it's not the same amount of teams, so that's why you got to do that. So pretty cool format, if you ask me. But
and schedules are that's that's the hardest thing in the world, right? Like you're dealing with building availability, and maybe in the case of a couple of teams, actually it might only be one now, but Cleveland shares a building with the Cavaliers, so they need to, and then there's concerts, of course, and there are all of these things going on that you have to account for. So like the Admirals, well, there might be a circus going on, although the circus has moved. But in the past, last year, actually, there was a circus that we had to avoid. So we couldn't games when we wanted to. So yeah, you end up with less than desirable dates. Everybody in the American League wants to play a Friday or a Saturday night because school nights are tough. And it just doesn't work out that way. In Winnipeg's case, in Manitoba's case, the Jets didn't want anybody using their ice while they were playing at home, so we had to push the games back a couple of extra days, and that's fine. But yeah, you run into a lot of those situations where it's the American Hockey League playoffs in some of these buildings are not the number one moneymaker, so you're going to have to figure out your schedule as you go.
So we're playing the Manitoba Moose. They're the farm system for the Winnipeg Jets.
Yep.
So maybe we can get a little bit of retribution here for the Predators fans, because we came up 3 points short of the Winnipeg Jets to make the playoffs. We're getting to see the Jets play the first round against the Vegas Golden Knights. We wish we could at least be that team and have our shot. So maybe we can get a little bit of revenge. Tell us a little bit about the Manitoba Moose, what type of players, what type of style they play. How do the Admirals match up with the Manitoba Moose, and what are you expecting out of this? What's going to be a best-of-5 series?
Best-of-5 series. The first 2 in Winnipeg, and the last 3, if all are needed, will be in Milwaukee. That's the way in the best-of-5 series. If teams are more than 300 miles apart, to save on costs rather than going the 2-2-1. To save on travel costs, that's how they set it up. So the higher seed gets to choose whether you want to play 2 at home to start and 3 on the road to finish, or 2 on the road to start and 3 at home to finish. The Admirals, like Manitoba did last year, you choose to start on the road. You figure you get 1 on the road and you're going to be golden at home, right? So that's the thought process behind it. Last year, it worked in Milwaukee's favor. They won both at home. It's hard to beat a team 3 straight times. Manitoba did it twice, but they didn't get that third one last season. So anyway, both the Admirals and Manitoba, they each won 4 games against one another this year. They do separate shootouts and overtime losses. So the Admirals went 4-3-1, 4-3-1-0, I should say, against Manitoba. Manitoba went 4-2-1-1 against Milwaukee this season. But again, both teams won 4 games. Manitoba may not have the most skilled forwards, but they're pluggers and they shoot from everywhere. The last year we saw it a lot with Devin Cooley having to stop 40-some shots in each of the first 2 games, specifically for the Admirals to win those contests. Their goaltending, we'll see what happens. Right now, Arvid Holm and Oskari Salminen, they split the time. I think both of those guys are serving as emergency guys at the moment in Winnipeg. So we'll see if one of those guys comes back. But Evan Cormier is a guy, a former draft pick in New Jersey. He spent the bulk of the last 2 years in the ECHL, but he does have 50 games of American Hockey League experience. Last year, he played 14 games for Manitoba, had a .924 save percentage. So he's a good goalie. He might be the best of all of them, actually, but he's not the draft pick. He's not the young guy there, so he's not getting the reps. This is still a developmental league, and teams want their draft picks to play. So, but Cormier may be the best one of all of them. So we'll see what he brings. The big thing with Manitoba's attack is they have 3 defensemen. Now, Declan Chisholm had a high ankle sprain late in the season. We'll see if he comes back. He's missed basically since the middle of March. I would suspect he's going to be back really soon. I would guess in this series. He's a phenomenal player. He had 7 points in 5 games against Milwaukee last season. Leon Gavanka is a defenseman who had 20 goals this year for Manitoba, and Ville Heinola is phenomenal. He's a first-round pick in 2019. Fantastic talent. So those are 3 defensemen back there that can really move the puck. As a matter of fact, it's frequent that their head coach, Mark Morrison, plays those 3 on the same power play unit. So they'll go 3 high with the umbrella with Gavanka, Chisholm, and Heinola, and just let those guys fire while 2 forwards try to crash the net. And it works for them. They were top, I think, 6th in the league in power play this season. So it is a team that they can cause some havoc. They've got good experience, and again, they're a heavier team. That being said, Milwaukee kind of feels the same way. Milwaukee has a heavy team. The question with Milwaukee is, how does everybody mesh together once again?
Yes.
First time those players left in the middle of February, basically, and were up in Nashville for a good chunk of that time. So now those players come back, specifically the final 7 that we're talking about. They need to come back and mesh in with what the Admirals had going, which was going pretty well. So it's going to be interesting to see what the lineup is tomorrow. Carl Taylor, as of Monday, said he was still doing some tryouts, basically, to see. He did not have a lineup firmed up in his mind. Now, obviously, he probably has a pretty good idea today, as the game is, we're talking on a Thursday, the game is on Friday. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm anxious to see what happens there. The Admirals will also run into a veteran issue. You can only play 5 players with more than 320 professional games entering this season. So the Admirals are going to have to scratch 2 guys. Tim Schaller is likely one, but who will the other one be? It might be Zach Sanford. It might be, I can't imagine it would be Cole Schneider. It might be Roland McEwen. It might be Kevin Gravel. There's going to be a heck of a good player that's going to have to sit, because you cannot have more than 5 veterans, again, 320 games or more, playing in a game in the American Hockey League. So there is that issue. Now you're going to have to you're going to have good attitudes. You can't have poison in the locker room. It's a tough situation. I think everybody understands it. They understand the predicament Carl Taylor's in. They don't have to be happy about it, but they have to be polite about it. And that's going to be an interesting thing to watch, not only in this first round, but as far as the Admirals go this year.
Mm-hmm. We're being joined by Aaron Sims, radio announcer for the Milwaukee Admirals. We're so happy to have him on such short notice as we get ready for the Calder Cup playoff run for the Milwaukee Admirals. I really want to touch on what you just said about Carl Taylor. We down here in Nashville, we were so impressed with how the Predators just refused to bow out of the playoff race after selling at the trade deadline. And then you get injury after injury after injury to your veteran core, mostly on the forward side, but then you also lose Roman Josi down the stretch. I mean, it was just crazy. And somehow the team just kept treading water up until game 80, until they were finally eliminated. And so when I look at Carl Taylor, I mean, I am just so incredibly impressed with how he has rallied this team when he has no idea who's going to be available to him. And now you're in the playoffs. And like you just said, Aaron, I'm very intrigued to see how this team comes together and how it affects your Luke. Like, I'm really focused on Luke Evangelista here because he looked so great on the NHL level. Like, I couldn't get over how fast he adapted to the NHL level. So, Aaron, when it comes to Luke Evangelista in particular, does he play the same style as he was playing on the Preds, or do you think he has to be a little bit different in the way he his playing style on the AHL level?
No. He has to just play the way he plays, right? The way he played in the American Hockey League earned him the shot in the National Hockey League, and the way he played in the National Hockey League kept him there. So he doesn't need to change a thing. Luke is such an interesting guy, right? 2nd round pick. He goes during the COVID season. He ends up in Chicago for I think it was 8 games, and really didn't look that he belonged there. Now, again, a lot of guys didn't that season because the OHL was shut down. You had a lot of 18, 19-year-old kids playing in that league that season. So I asked, I'll never forget, this is one of the things from this season that is always stuck with me. So I asked Carl Taylor, beginning of the season, a week before the season, I said, what do you expect from these guys? I said, how was Luke? And he says, Luke didn't look the part in Chicago a couple of years ago. So I don't know what we're going to get. We're going to give him a chance in Chicago for game 1, and we'll see how it goes. Well, the Admirals won game 1 in Chicago. I asked him after the game, I said, and again, I was specific with Luke because of course he had the 55 goals in London, and everybody wants to know, those are crazy numbers. 100. It's like, you don't get that player much anymore. So I asked Carl afterwards, after the Chicago game, the first one of the season, I said, what did you think about Luke Evangelista? And he said, Luke made every right decision, but he was a half second late. And I thought, wow, that's high praise, right? Because he was doing what he needed to do. He just needed to adapt to the speed of the game. And you could say that for a lot of people because it is game 1. You've been practicing against one another. You're not playing at 110% or 100, 100%. I don't like the 110%. But anyway, you're not playing at 100% speed. You're not throwing bodies around and all of that stuff. So I think everybody was probably a little bit off, right? That it's game 1. It's to be expected. It wasn't that long after that he straightened everything out, and he's been magnificent. He's quite possibly been, and we're talking about a 20-year-old kid. He's quite possibly been the Admirals' most consistent forward from day 1. And It's pretty amazing to see. So does he need to change? Absolutely not. Nobody would want him to change because he had great success here, 41 points in 49 games. He had great success in Nashville with 15 points in 24 games. I don't know any team that wouldn't take a 0.7 per game points player anywhere in hockey. So he doesn't need to change a thing. He just needs to get used to being the man. Now he's a part of the team, but he also, like guys come down and they, you still got to be a part of the team. That's the big thing. But you also got to understand that, you're a marquee player now, so you're looked to provide some offense. I heard Charles Barkley say this one time, and Darren Hadar, former Nashville draft pick and the Admirals' all-time leading scorer and the AHL's all-time playoff scoring leader. They both said this to me, and Darren reiterated it. But Charles Barkley said, in the regular season, the star player has to get everybody involved. In the postseason, the star player needs to take all the shots. And I thought that was a phenomenal quote. Get everybody involved, make everybody feel good during the regular season. That's a long way to go. But when the money's on the line, the best player needs to be the best player. And I want to see Luke Evangelista be that guy. And I think he can be that guy.
We don't get a lot of Charles Barkley references on this podcast, so I'm all for that. And I love
Ernie Johnson from TNT grew up in a house 6 houses from where I live right now in Milwaukee. So a couple of years ago, they were in town for the NBA Eastern Conference Finals. It was the year the Bucks lost that year, but they were in town, and Ernie visits this house. So Ernie's there with Shaq and Charles Barkley, and it turns into this kind of neighborhood party, right? No, it's just very impromptu and all of this. So I go down there, and Charles Barkley and my neighbor goes, he broadcasts the hockey games. She's shouting at Charles Barkley, and he's like, oh yeah, and he comes over to me. And he says, who do you broadcast for? And I said, Nashville or Milwaukee. And he goes, who's their affiliate? I said, Nashville. He goes, they didn't have a good season this year, did they? It was like, what was going on? It was pretty good. Mm-hmm. It was really funny. So, he's all about it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, Charles Barkley likes his hockey. Yeah, for sure. I love that. All right, so I want to kind of get into the goalie situation. We kind of touched on the Manitoba Moose and their goalie situation. So, of course, Yaroslav Askarov is going to be the game one starter, correct?
I would guess. I haven't seen a lineup, but Askarov played 7 of the 8 games against Manitoba this year, had a .916 save percentage against the Moose this season, went 3-3-1. I suspect that he's going to get as many touches as possible here, yes.
Do you see a situation where they could go to Devin Cooley in game 2 and do like a swap thing, or is it all going to be based on performance in game 1?
I think even when Yaroslav has had a bad game, and there haven't been many, it's happened though. They go back with him because you got to build up the confidence. You got to, if the guy does poorly and you yank him, listen, this guy, quite frankly, we're developing this kid to be the number 1 goalie at some point in Nashville, right? Mm-hmm. To do that, you want to be in a winning environment, and you have to be the guy who carries the load somewhere along the way. My first season, again, 05-06, Pekka Rinne was a rookie goaltender. He got the job in the playoffs once he came after the first round. So he missed the first round, 7-game series against Iowa that season, the Iowa Stars. But he was in goal for a 4-game sweep of the Houston Aeros and a 4-game sweep of the Grand Rapids Griffins, and then was the goalie in 6-game series, a loss to the Hershey Bears in the final. Pekka was pulled 3 times in that series, but he came back and started each of the games following. So you're developing the future. So it would have to be horrible. It would have to be just catastrophic for him, I would think, to not play in another game in that series. I think it's going to be his job, no matter how far the Admirals go, with all due respect. And this is not bad-mouthing Devin Cooley by saying this, but Askarov is the future, and he's going to be the one that gets to touch the puck.
And as you bring up Devin Cooley, I know he's been in the news a little bit, even down here among Pred circles, in terms of, I guess he changed agents. Can you fill us in a little bit on what's going on with Devin Cooley and his possible future? Because the goalie pipeline is always a tough thing, especially when you're talking about the Nashville Predators goalie pipeline. And so do you think Devin Cooley is looking to where he can get more starts in a different system?
I don't know. I haven't talked with Devin about it. He's a great kid, a good citizen, good family. His mom and dad, they're just fantastic when they come and visit. It's nice to see them. So I don't know what Devin is thinking right now. It's during the season. I hesitate to ask him. But that being said, it's his third year as a pro. He sees the writing on the wall. Connor Ingram saw it last year. Connor Ingram told me, and this is, I don't think I'm telling tales out of school, but Connor knew very well that Yaroslav Askarov was going to be here. He showed up at the end of last season, and Connor knew that they wanted Askarov to get as many games as possible. So Connor knew that he was on the outs eventually. And then when Kevin Lankinen gets signed, obviously now there's a major competition, and it turns out indeed that way. So my guess is Devin Cooley, with his UFA 6 designation, is going to look at every possibility to be a number 3 in some organization. He's not going to be a number 3 here in Milwaukee or in Nashville's pipeline for the foreseeable future. So that would be my guess. Would he love to come back to Milwaukee? I'm sure he would. I think he likes his teammate. I know he likes his teammates, and I know he loves playing with Yaro. But he'd also like to play 40 games in a season, and that's not going to happen as long as Askarov is here. So where does he end up? I have no idea. I'd love for it to be back in Milwaukee, but, hopefully for him, he finds a job that, a few years ago, 2014, Scott Darling was a guy, they were trying to get him back on an AHL, ECHL contract, and he thought about it, and all of a sudden, here comes the Chicago Blackhawks offering an NHL deal, and later that year, he's holding the Stanley Cup. So, who knows what's going to happen? But again, I wish nothing but the best for him. He's been great when called upon here. He's a good kid. I just think, to be fair to him, he wants to play, and I can't fault him at all for that, because players want to play. Yeah, it's great to be up in the National Hockey League, but if you're wearing the suit all the time, I think a lot of guys would tell you, money be damned. We just want to play hockey. That's why we're here. So, let's go down and play and work out a trade, whatever it might be. But let's get into a situation where I can play. And I think that's what Cooley wants.
Yeah, for sure. And he's been, as you're saying, his play on the ice has been great. He's great off the ice. He deserves all the playing time he can get if it's out there and it presents itself. I've always looked at it almost like if you're thinking starting quarterback, backup quarterback in football, you've got a really awesome, great, talented backup quarterback, and that quarterback sees the writing on the wall that they're never going to be the starter in their current situation. So they're going to look elsewhere so that they can get more snaps. I look at it the same way in terms of goalies in hockey. And so for Devin Cooley, I just hope that he can find the best opportunity for himself. And if that means it's not with the Admirals, then that's a tough loss for us, but he's got to do what's best for him. So
I don't fault him. Any decision he makes, it's very personal. And you wish nothing but the best for him. Because again, it's not like he's a bad guy. It's not like he's been a bad guy. And it's not like he's not talented. So get yours, man. Life, careers are too short. You got to get yours when you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Aaron, this has been a lot of fun. One last question, because I know you got to get going here and you're a busy man right now covering.
Lost you there, Chad. Are we still there?
I just got booted. Can you hear me?
I got you now. Yes, sir.
I just got booted out of my own studio. What is going on here? All right. Well, you can't trust the internet connection at all times. All right. I'm back, guys. I'm back. All right. I was just getting ready to ask an awesome question, too, to close this thing out. All right. Can you hear me, Aaron?
I got you. You're good.
All right. So here's my deal. What are you thinking? How deep can the Admirals go this year in these playoffs? Are you thinking this is the type of team that has championship pedigree? The team hasn't won a Calder Cup since 2004. We know the COVID shortened year. Unfortunately, who knows what would have happened? That was an incredible team. So what are you thinking? Do you think this team has championship pedigree and can actually win a Calder Cup?
I'd love to think so, right? Like you get those players back from Nashville. It's hard. You've got to combine the best special teams in the American Hockey League. You've got a goaltender who can be a horse, and a backup who can also be a guy that you can count on in the playoffs. The defenseman I love. Up front, you get those players back from Nashville. I mean, you got to temper the enthusiasm, right? You can't sit here and say, we're going to sweep all the way through and win it all. But I have a hard time thinking that people don't see this team as having a good chance to do it. The tough thing is we haven't seen the vast majority of teams in the American Hockey League. So, what happens if the Admirals do win the next 2 rounds, and now they'll play Calgary or Coachella Valley or whoever from out west? We have no idea what to expect from them. And have, in Calgary, they have the guy who won MVP and goalie of the year in Dustin Wolf. So it's an interesting question. It's one.
All right. I think we just lost Aaron there. I think we're having some connection issues. Let's see if he'll pop back in. If not, it's been a really awesome conversation with Aaron Sims, radio announcer for the Milwaukee Admirals, as the Admirals get ready for game 1 of the Calder Cup playoffs on Friday night. We're recording this on a Thursday. Aaron, thank you so much for joining me, man. Connection issues and all, it doesn't matter. It was a great segment, great episode. Follow the Milwaukee Admirals through their Calder Cup trophy pursuit, trying to win their first Calder Cup since 2004. Thanks, everyone, for catching this bonus episode of Catfish on Ice, episode 183. We have episode 182 that just got posted earlier today, as the full crew talked about the history of the Nashville Predators in the Stanley Cup playoffs, covered some of the most memorable moments from that. Hit subscribe on the YouTube channel below, or follow us on Twitter at Catfish Ice. We're also on Facebook. We're on Instagram. Check us out there. Thanks so much to Aaron Sims for joining us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week for a brand new episode of Catfish on Ice, presented by DraftKings. Promo code THPN. You can win some bonus bets right now if you bet on a $5 bet on the Stanley Cup playoffs right now. So go check that out on DraftKings Sportsbook with promo code THPN. And we're part of the Hockey Podcast Network. Hope everyone has a great rest of your day.